I've got an illuminating video for you all tonight. We're going to be taking a look at the LTC CF-121D. It is a brand new RGB fan from LTC. Let's get right into it. First, a little bit of spec information. There's its name. It's a 25mm fan. It's got a hydrodynamic bearing, which is basically a fluid dynamic bearing. I couldn't find a power outage or power amperage for it, but it does spin at 800 RPM with a maximum RPM of 1800. All right, now that we've taken a look at the specs, I want to do a quick open box. In full disclosure, LTC reached out to me and they provided this fan to me. This is the first fan I haven't purchased for myself. So full disclosure, I received this as a product and didn't pay for it with my own money as a review. So obviously the box is very plain and basic. That's perfectly fine. I see no reason to have fancy packaging, honestly, especially if you're selling on Amazon. This is the connection bracket that slides onto, edit backwards, it does go onto this side and it just slides neatly into place, and that works perfectly fine. It's got the plugs as well as the RGB plugs, and it just connects right into there and it transfers data right through it. So this really simplifies the connection process and being able to connect multiple fans to one fan header and then have them all be controlled at once. Now, it does take quite a bit of force to lock the fans together, but they're fairly secure. Unlocking it equally takes a little bit of extra force, maybe a little bit more than I'd prefer, but it's fine. My other note that I'm going to say is everything is done at a price, and perhaps this is just a less expensive way of doing it. It uses actual physical pins that slide into physical slots over there. So do note just to be a little bit extra careful with these and maybe not detach too many times, because you don't want to get these pins bent, because it would basically render the product non-functional. So on the sides here, we got this nice shiny metal. So take a look at it. Pretty nice looking metal front on it. Got a little bit of texture there, so it might actually be machined. Pretty good mirror finish on it. Hub is about average for what we're seeing with modern fans. It's going to be RGB, some RGB around the sides. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. Gap between the blades and the housing is about average. Blade design is focused more on an airflow style design as opposed to a pressure optimized one, just because of the gaps you're seeing between each of the blades. So as a radiator fan, it's going to probably fall behind more the top end fans, but everything is at a price, and we'll take a look at value later on in this review. There's the back of it. So it's just got a little bit of sticker on it. The wire cabling could be a little bit nicer. It's just kind of hanging out there in the open. It's very reminiscent of older style fans. Actually, Noctua still does that. I'd like to see them improve that in the future. The struts are nice and thin. No real complaints. They've got a good curvature on them to deflect the air, so it's not going to cause too much of obstruction. And one last thing that I'm noting as I'm taking a look at this, in the packaging, I only see one of these connectors, which means you're going to be plugging all these fans in together as one unit, and you would have to buy another one of these in order to or figure out the wiring and make your own if you wanted to have these as like two in the front, one in the back, something like that. Otherwise you're basically stuck with using all three as one unit. So that's a little bit of a downside with these fans. So that is one thing that LTC could do better, is include extender or another one of these brackets to be able to wire a fan separately as an exhaust in case you were wanting to utilize this in a case that only had two fans in the front or something like that, just to increase the versatility of this kit. First up in testing is the case simulation test. So first and foremost, the way to use this is, what size computer case do you actually plan on buying? Are you going to be putting this into a small form factor type case? So there it would fit approximately 120mm class fan in terms of its length, so it's not really applicable to this triple fan stack. But if you wanted to use it inside that size case, this would be the performance mark you'd be taking a look at. And this does assume a front to back airflow with an air cooler. Then we'd be looking at the 9-inch mark. Whoop, that got shifted off to the side. Instead of at the 9, it's at the 8. But it would be a case that holds 220mm class fans. So if you're looking at a compact tower, so think a case that can hold a standard ATX motherboard with a GPU of the same length as the motherboard, no overhang, front to back airflow. That would be the size case you're taking a look at. Then we've got the 11-inch mark. 320mm class fans or the 360 AIO, so that's perfect for this triple pack. So strapping it to your AIO. And for this, you'd be taking a look at like Meshify 2C, Corsair 5000 series, something like that. And then for truly large cases, you'd be taking a look at the 14.5-inch mark. Here you'd be looking at cases like the Fractal Design Torrent, and it would be able to hold 340mm class fans. So we need to compare it against something, and that would be my control fan. It is based 3 parts A12X5 to 1 part A14, creating a blended, what I'm calling a 130mm class fan. That's sort of the middle ground, best of both, or neutral of both worlds, between the benefits of 120s and the benefits of 140s. So right away, this fan really isn't optimized for case airflow. It just drops off a little bit too steeply. So we're going to move on quickly. At 100% PWM fan signaling, it's still dropping off a little bit too steeply unless you're looking at smaller cases. So it's not really a strong contender as a case fan. But comparing against other fans, it starts off really well in smaller cases. So it would do well at a short throw distance, blowing up towards your GPU. If you were to put these at the bottom of your case blowing up, it would do fine at that job. But for bigger cases, it's just not focusing the airflow quite enough. At 100%, again, it's just dropping up a little too much. It's below a lot of, well, other fans. Although, ironically, it's not much worse than the brand new Height Flow FA12. So, you know, it's in the right ballpark, I guess. And in terms of noise versus airspeed, this is at the 9-inch mark. This sort of measurement could be taken at any of the measurement locations, but this is the one I decided on. So it's off the target spot. So you can see where most of these other fans lie. What I consider the best case fan right now is the TLS12W, and it's just a far cry. It's far too noisy at this decibels versus airspeed. If you take a look at it in Sone is a brand new measurement that I'm using on a lot of my graphs, and it's just a different way of measuring sound. It converts the exponential behavior of decibels into a linear behavior, so it helps stretch out the noise, higher noise levels off to the right side here. And it's a little bit on the noisy side for this type of application of these fans. Next, taking a look at the fan in air cooler testing, my cooler of choice is the Noctua U12A. And as a note, I do have radiator in my testing now, and I'm finding that air speeds traveling through the radiator are very similar to the air speeds that I measure going through the air cooler, so I'm at this time calling them the same. But this sort of test should be very applicable for this triple pack, which is a lot of what this company's advertising this fan's application to be. And the first one, we have RPM versus airspeed. RPM is horizontal, airspeed is vertical, and basically that's a blade efficiency graph. And, I mean, it's beating out my control fan ever so slightly, so that's a good result. But if we take a look at the noise versus airspeed, it's a little bit off to the right side, which means it's a bit noisier for the same airspeed than my control fan. And if we cross-compare it against a bunch of other fans, it's in the middle in my noise normalized results. It's not terrible, but it's also not a standout in this particular test at noise normalized values. Now at rip-roaring 100% PWM fan signaling, it's at 29.4 decibels by my readings. It's around the same noise level as the Silent Wings 4 Pro at its full speed. So in terms of absolute performance-wise, it's a little bit on the lacking side. We're going to have to see how it does in the value. And in case you're wondering, here's decibels versus airspeed, decibels horizontal, airspeed vertical, and it, once again, we're seeing it's just a little bit on the low side of this graph, so bottom right is worse than top left. So it's just a bit noisy for how much airspeed it's moving. Once again, taking a look at it in Sone, and it's just a little bit on the noisy side for how much airspeed it's actually pushing through the radiator. And here's a brief look at the RGB of these fans. I just plugged them in and the fans are doing their own thing. The colors are not synchronized together, so it's not particularly uniform. That of course can be fixed in software, so it's perfectly fine. And if we come around to the top, it has a little bit of a ring effect around that, that silver piece. Looks pretty good if I do say so. Plenty of illumination. The back here, keeping my fingers out of the way. Again, just have two of the fans plugged in. So again, here's the view from the back, now that I've put it down. It looks all right. I mean, that could look better, so they're definitely much prettier from the front. So one really nice thing about these fans is I think I counted 10 RGB LEDs. So it's got plenty of illumination, and the more LEDs that are in it, the more even the lighting is between it. And if we take a look at it in rainbow mode, there's a very good color mixing actually going on. So given this fan's price, that is a good amount of illumination. So if you like RGB, these are looking really good. My last test is RPM versus CFM. CFM is basically a scientific exercise. All that being said, this is how the fan performed at RPM versus CFM. It's lining up close enough to my control fan that its blade design is fairly effective. And decibel versus CFM, it's a little bit far off to the right side. It's just not quite keeping up in terms of noise levels. And taking a look at it compared to other fans, well, it's pretty close to the bottom, so better be good value. And at 100%, once again, it's kind of in the middle. It's actually not a bad place for it to be for the amount of air, but it's just a bit on the noisy side compared to other fans around it that we see with very similar RPMs and pushing very similar quantities of air. And here's its noise rating versus air movement. Now, I will say it's, I mean, I don't want to say it's the best or the worst, or it's not the worst, but there are other fans that also don't quite perform very well in this test, like the Flow FA12 does not perform well in this test, and the Air Blazer 120i Lite also did not perform particularly well in this test. Into value proposition. So retail price for this fan is $40 for a triple pack, which brings the fans to $13.33. The company is offering a promotion by purchasing it through the link down below to get a discount, and I'll have that in the last section when we take a look at it in terms of airspeed through a cooler, because that's where this fan I think is really most applicable. So at the 6-inch mark, performance through the case simulation test, its value is kind of upper middle-ish. It definitely beats out a lot of other fans, but it's missing that top tier regime. Once again, value proposition is just performance per dollar. It does not include extras. Extras being, for example, with this fan, RGB lighting. This fan has a lot of RGB lighting, so it's missing out on that. So if you care more about RGB lighting than you do about the raw performance, but you still want something that's a good value, this still might be an okay pick for you because it has a lot of illumination, especially compared to other fans like, which one on here? The K12 and the S12 don't have a lot of LED lights. So if you want a lot of bedazzle and bling, this is a better pick despite not moving as much air. But I can't make that decision for you. It is up to you to decide where you want to spend your money and how to spend it on. I can only present the data. So this data does not include those extras. So I just want you all to be perfectly aware of that. At the 11-inch mark, well, I don't recommend it for bigger case. It just doesn't have the same sort of grunt airspeed to push the air through the case very effectively. CFM testing, lower middle, 100%, lower middle, and at the cooler. So first, its regular retail price. So it's in the upper middle part in terms of the value proposition. It is beating out like the K12, which is an RGB fan, and value. The S12 is a better value than it, but do note it has less lighting. So if you like more lighting, then the CF-121D might be a better pick for you. It all depends on what your particular performance needs are. And once again, it's up to you where you want to spend your money. And then a 20% discount, which is what I saw on Amazon at time of filming, basically. And that brings the fan down to a $10.67. So I'm going to bounce between the two. That brings its value way up, several places up, in a more acceptable manner. So I guess it brings me to spending $32 on this pack is the maximum I would spend on it, personally, I guess. It just brings it to a better value, especially raw performance-wise. It's just not quite hitting the marks. But the LED lighting, if that's your thing, they look pretty good. All right, here's the raw data. The raw data does belong to me. Again, full disclosure, company LTC did provide me the fans for free to do this review. They have a lot of RGB lighting. I found their performance lacking. So if you want a fan that is fairly expensive that has a lot of lighting, they are potentially a good pick. There was nothing quite fundamentally wrong with these fans, but there was also nothing fundamentally great with these fans. Actually, I take that back. The using them as case fans, they're going to be a little bit lacking in that department. If you're not too worried about it, you just care about air cycle in, air cycle out, they're going to do okay. Especially if you're going to throw in an AIO on the top and you're just going to buy 2 of these packs and put one on the front, one on the top, you're going to be fine in terms of your thermals. But if you're really looking at like pushing your limits, pushing everything, there are just better fans out there. I give it a it's fine mark. No money exchange hands for this review, so that is kind of my opinion of this fan. Is it's fine. And being fine is fine. I think that they have plenty of room to grow, and I would look forward to see what their next fan comes out as. But if you got suggestions for more fans for me to take a look at, please leave that in the comment sections down below. If you have suggestions on ways I can make my videos better, please leave that in the comment sections down below as well. And if you like this channel, like the content I make, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button or become a Patreon and YouTube member, because that money does go a long way in making this channel possible and helping it grow and being able to purchase supplies rather than relying on companies to give me a freebie, I guess. I hope I created a honest review for this first time getting it for free. My opinion is still my own about it. It doesn't change the raw values that I got when I tested this fan. So all of that is, I guess, what it is, because I value having consistent data. It doesn't mean anything to me if I artificially inflate numbers, because then I'm just lying to myself, and I'm all about this data and having this large catalog of data that I can go to going, well, okay, which fans do I want to buy for my next computer build? All right, I rambled on enough. Have a great day. I'll see you next time here on Computer Tech and More.